Hello, everyone. Welcome to Pixelated Perfect. Today, I have with me Kultar. I'm super excited to chat with him a little bit about his design career. He is currently based in the UK. He is a design lead and a mentor. He's been designing for over 18 years. He currently is working at Williams Commerce, which I'm sure we'll hear a little bit more about. And he's also a mentor on ADP List. So thank you so much, Kultar, for joining us.
Thanks for reaching out and thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Of course. So super excited. So let's dive right in. Can you tell me when design came into your life?
Geez, as far back as I can remember, in all honesty. I studied design. I remember early secondary school. Actually, even before that, even in primary school, just enjoying sketching and drawing. Through academic studying, secondary school. I remember taking up all the art classes, graphic classes, anything that was creative, woodworking, technical drawing, and just realizing that I enjoyed that. And as you progress through academic studies, they try to get you to put yourself in a box and choose what you want to specialize in. And I never really wanted to pick one box. I never really knew what I wanted to do. I just knew I liked being creative. So I remember around about the A-level marks, A-level time when I picked graphic design. So I specialized in graphic design, and it just so happens my other studies around that time were psychology, the way the brain works, and sciences, specifically biology, the human body. So it all in all that kind of stuff still gets used to this day, the way, user-centered design and how people behave, how the mind behaves, how we use technology. It all falls back into patterns and studies that relate back to design. And this is going back into the early 90s now. So around about then is when I knew this is what I enjoyed.
Yes.
I progressed that through to university, so studied foundation, studied multimedia design. Back then it was very much CD-ROMs and flash sites.
Yes.
So just figuring out how that works, how the timeline works and tweening works, and making things engaging and interactive. I furthered them studies into a master's in design. So I went on to study a master's in design and manufacturing. And straight out of the pan, as soon as I graduated from that, I went into my first job, which was basically a startup in the local city center doing graphic design work and very, very early stages of like HTML building.
Wow.
And that's where I kind of learned everything that I've learned for the past 5 years needs to be thrown out the window, and I need to start again because
Right.
it very much is not reflective of what is actually happening in the industry. Or you might get a job come in or that is something that you've not studied for, or it's not part of that remit, so you have to learn on the job. So very,
Right.
very early doors, I had to kind of adapt and go with the flow.
Yeah. No, that's great. So question, what made you decide to get your master's in design? I know you said design and manufacturing, because I know a lot of designers, usually they're like, oh, I don't need a master's, or like they just jump straight into work. So what was that like reasoning for you there?
Good question. It's going back a few years now. So I
Yeah.
remember at that time, everyone was graduating, everyone was, sick of studying, sick of exams. I got offered a conditional offer from the university that I was on. It was too good an offer to refuse. So regardless of what grade I got, I had a place in this master's course.
Wow. Okay.
So I just said, yeah, what's one more year?
Right. Yeah, for sure. I was just curious because that's interesting. So you graduated after your master's, you got your first job in the startup, and you also said so you were doing like graphic design and HTML. So was that your first time kind of dealing with HTML, or was that something you had already been studying and you felt like you had knowledge of?
No, so I see so many articles nowadays, should designers know code and should they not, and all that Webflow and all this kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
for me, it happened by chance and by accident. I was on my university course and I just happened to be in a HTML class, which was, as a designer, everything's visual, everything's how does it make you feel? And all of a sudden you enter the matrix and it's just
Right.
hashtags and codes and open variables and symbol, and you just think, whoa, what is all of this? But so I stuck it out. I got to learn the fundamentals of what was XHTML and CSS, which at
Yeah.
the time was like, fine. I don't need it to do my job, but it's handy to have. But what
Right.
I learned was that was a blessing in disguise, because throughout my career, especially my early years, I would design stuff and hand over to a developer, and it was very much a over the fence job. Here you go, here's what I designed, and they would go away and build it. And
Hmm.
as HTML and developing became more and more difficult, responsive design, different outputs, mobile phones, different desktops and laptops, resolutions. That job I have a massive appreciation for, but I didn't have the skills to communicate this is what I was after, or this is what I wanted. So
Yeah.
it just so happened that I knew code. So instead of getting frustrated, I would jump in and help out, or even build things myself. So
Very cool.
if I wasn't comfortable handing this over to someone, I would design a website, I would build it then.
I mean, I think that's a great skill to have. And I think it is like a hot topic because there is all these no codes and they're like designers don't need to know code and the working so closely now to try to build a better relationship with designers and developers. And
Yes,
I
yes.
actually personally don't know code, and I feel like that's definitely been lacking in my career as a designer because I think if I did know code, I would be able to not only maybe do some tweaks, but also be able to understand what I was how I was designing and designing it in a way that would make
Yeah,
sense to
yeah,
hand off.
yeah. So part of my mentoring, and what one line I always hear myself say to a lot of people that I'm talking to, is to become a great designer, to become really, really good at what you do. It's not just what you do in the design, it's what you do outside of the design. And I wish someone told me that right at the start of my career, because I spent so much time thinking honing my craft and thinking I'm the best at what I do. This is the best
Yeah.
design. But everything you do to become a great designer happens outside of that design. And what I mean by that is how you communicate with others, how you explain to others and stakeholders w- what you've done and what decisions you've carved in and what data informs your design. Because at that time, it was very much, here's my design, here you go. I'm not going to explain what I've done.
Right.
Explaining what you've done and a strategy that you've taken and the decisions that you've done is very much a skill. And most designers, are either introverts or kind of like they they fail at that kind of aspect, or they um they don't know how design fits into the bigger picture,
Mm-hmm.
or the business of design. And that's something that I wish I learned very, very early on. Because so the more I learned about that, the more that made me a better designer, because I knew what I was doing, how it fit into the bigger picture, and
Right.
more importantly, how it was going to drive a return on investment.
I love that you said that. I actually had a podcast where I was talking to someone about this in more detail too. And I think it's interesting is like you were honing in on your craft as a designer. Like that's what you thought was most important. But most designers and users don't realize that really like the big value they can provide is communication and understanding the business of the company.
Yeah.
And that's so interesting. That's not something that like it's like you usually learn it, you get thrown into it, and it's something like you
Yes.
pick up and realize. And so,
It's definitely a tough one, and
yeah,
it's also a part of that is also listening to others, getting feedback, knowing what feedback to action, and all of that stuff, everything outside of the design.
yeah.
And it's just as important as honing your craft and your skills.
Yes. So what do you tell these designers that you're mentoring how do you suggest that they can gain these skills, or what should they be working on to improve some of this?
It depends on the actual person and where they're at, their level of confidence, their level of knowledge. Something that we were doing was getting them to shadow some of the more senior and experienced people to get a feel of not just how they sell the design, some of the terminology they use, and how they navigate around certain scenarios, especially when the someone's asking questions and they don't know the answers to, or and just to be a bit more professional about things.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good way to get them, you know, uh, in involved in that kind of scenario, giving them a chance to see firsthand, and then slowly getting them to practice internally, getting them to practice presenting to other team members to build up that confidence, and then edging them more and more towards being client facing.
Yeah, that's great advice. So in this first, in your first job as the graphic designer and kind of working on web designs, what was kind of, I guess, what was next from there? What skills did you learn, and where did it take you from there?
Okay, so I'm trying to think now because it was a while ago. So in my first kind of startup, it was very rough and ready. It was
Mhm.
this is the job, go and do it, and and it varied from designing for print for like other local businesses in the area, designing
Yep.
websites, um, designing dashboards and all kind of other stuff that was around at the time. And at that point, when I knew I was ready for the next step up, I've worked for a, a wide variety of businesses. So
Hmm.
throughout my career, from that startup, I've kind of journeyed on to in-house, so working for really, really large corporations, being an in-house designer, then working for agencies, working for startups, working freelance. So I kind of know the difference as a designer, being the difference between being in-house and being at an agency,
Right.
and the different challenges that come with that, and the different opportunities that come with that, and the different mindsets that you need to kind of switch between those as well.
Totally. Do you have a particular industry or a particular in-house freelance startup world that you prefer to work in as a designer?
No, I don't. I like it when the job is varied, so you don't get stuck doing the same job, but also each different experience will teach you something different. And that's why I really appreciate about my journey, just thinking back, because whether it was good or bad, I learned something, right?
Right.
Um, but personally, I prefer being agency side because I like the variety. Um, and just the different things that come with that.
Right. Yeah. I'm kind of in the same, but I feel like when you're in the agency world, it's like you get to talk to so many different people, you get to learn so many different things, you get to work on so
Yeah,
many different projects.
yeah.
Um,
You
which
get
is
exposed to a lot more different worlds, and you get to deep dive into them and things that you wouldn't normally encounter if you were were to do so in-house. But then
yeah.
in-house, you have the advantage of starting a project, releasing it and seeing it through, and then evolving it and developing a
Yes.
brand and doing multiple iterations whilst also doing different things and for the brand. Um, uh, I remember working for a number of different large corporations. I don't know if we can name drop here, but
Whatever you want.
um, so with the likes of mobile in the telecommunications industry, Vodafone and Carphone Warehouse, Argos, Homebase, things like that, where they are very, very unique sectors, um, and they are utilizing digital transformations and doing really, really cool stuff. So
Right.
you get to kind of innovate and try new things and see how that works within the bigger picture. And things like, for example, Vodafone, like they there was a scenario where they wanted to branch out under a different brand, and I was fortunate enough to be there at the time and help them figure out what they should do before going down the Voxy route. So
Interesting.
yeah, you get to do cool things like that.
So in a scenario like that, for instance, like how what was your role in the company and how were you like able to kind of work through?
It was very, very early doors, and I happened to be there when they wanted to experiment down different avenues of innovation. So my job was to kind of validate which one was viable, and we did some user testing with a small group of people to figure out if this was going to be, worth their time and money and
Right.
investment. And it was very, very um quick, and there was a lot of guerrilla testing, a lot of uh fast feedback, but all in all, the feedback that we got, it managed them to give them the thumbs up to say yes, this is viable, and also like how to take things forward.
So it sounds like you also have had experience like working in large companies and in startups. And this was kind of maybe it was a startup then, or it was like a branch of a larger company
Hmm.
that you're kind of working in. What advice do you have for other designers that are trying to decide like, do they want to go startup route? Do they want to go big company route?
Yeah, I've had a couple of those scenarios recently. Um, it depends on where they are and where they want to go. So, for example, if they're trying to get their if someone is trying to become a designer or is a designer and is trying to get into the industry, it's always good to know where they want to go, but don't let that hold you back. There's never one route to get there. You might need to hop, skip, and jump a couple of different jobs to gain experience before you're ready for that perfect role at this cool tech startup that is your dream job.
Yes.
Ultimately, that shouldn't stop you from going straight there. Um, but as long as you know what you want, if and design today is such a wide variety in terms of a wide spectrum of jobs. So you can have UX, you can have UI, you can have product, that's another debate what you call yourself, but
Yes.
there's so many different strings. And then let's just take one string, for example. Let's take UX. You have so many different levels in that. You have UX designer, UX researcher, if you're a UI designer, are you just print? Are you brand? Are you digital? Are you all of those? And know what you want to do, and you won't necessarily know the answer to that until you try it.
Right.
So don't box yourself. Go and try as many things as you like, and as soon as you know what you enjoy, follow it. And then it for me, I I've said that since day one. I've never boxed myself, and to this day, I approach everything like it's a toolbox mentality. So I have a number of tools and a number of skills, whether I don't need to use every single one to get the job done, depends on
Right.
the job that is in front of me.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. It's like your toolbox. So depending on what you're
Yeah,
thrown into, what kind of project you have, that's where you
yeah,
decide which tools you're going to need.
yeah. I can be a UX designer and a UI designer and a brand designer. I've done all of that stuff, but I
Right.
don't necessarily need to do it on every single project. I can code, but I don't need to code on every single project. If the opportunity is there and I'm needed to, and if it helps, then yeah, I'll dust the old hat off and start coding. But
Right.
it goes for other things as well, management, leading teams, coaching. Um, and everything else.
No, I think that that makes a lot of sense. I really like not boxing yourself in and using your toolbox.
Yeah,
um, where so in your career, as you've kind of like shifted into different, you said you did some agencies, you've done a little bit of everything.
yeah.
What was that experience of like gaining this knowledge and gaining these tools in your toolbox? And when did you know like that you were ready to be like a mid-level or a senior or a manager? What did that kind of look like for you?
Whenever you go for a job interview, the typical scenario, the typical question you get asked is, where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? Where do you see yourself in 10 years' time? It's very, very cliche. I get it,
Yes.
but you're not actually paying attention to the answer. You want to know if the person has ambitions or not.
Mm-hmm.
And my typical answer would be, I want to be, head of design. I want to be, running a team. And I work from a junior level to become head of design. I've done that, and I've got to where I wanted to go to.
Yeah.
And not everyone is cut out to be a good design manager, or might not enjoy it, or you don't get taught to become a design manager. Quite often you just naturally progress and inherit those responsibilities.
Yeah.
It's only when you get there, then you get sent on these courses on to how to do this and how to manage and what's the difference between managing and leading. But and again, I still to this day think that that is another tool that's in the box. If I need to manage and lead a team, I can.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, as soon as I got to that point, I knew, right, okay, I've got a lot of skills here. I don't need to do every single one of them. So let's just go where I enjoy the most and I can add most value.
I like that. So, what advice do you have for designers that also have that mindset like you did of like becoming head of design? Like, what what would you, or I'm sure you, as a mentor, you've talked to this about this with your mentees, is like, how do
Mm.
you tell them of how to get there, what steps they need to take, or what they really need to get good at? Because obviously managing is very different from designing
Yeah,
in
yeah.
many aspects.
So firstly, they need to know what they want to do. So they need to know, a lot of the time design the sessions I have is, I don't know what I want, how to get
Right.
into design or what I want to
Right.
do. So right at the bottom end of the spectrum. So figure out what you want to do. And then once you know what you like doing, work on your craft, put the time in, don't put the work in, and you can then see how far do you want to go before your head hits the glass ceiling. So in some industries and in some jobs, it's natural to progress to kind of a director level, for example. But for
Mm-hmm.
design, there is it's I speak from experience, so I know you can go to a certain level and then your head hits the glass ceiling in terms of you can be the best designer or the most experienced designer in your team. And then you can either choose to carry on doing that, or you step back from the design and you manage the rest of the team.
Right.
And it's it, it's great because throughout my career, that's kind of, you know that's coming and you know what it's about and you know what to do. And but now there's a new term for it. It's called design ops. That's the new buzzword, right? So
Yeah.
in it, you typically tend to find every so often there's a buzzword that gets thrown around and then gets used to death.
Yes.
First it's responsive, and then it's agile, and then it's UX, and then until that word becomes dirty and no one knows what it means,
Right.
then there's a new one to come around, and flat design and all that kind of stuff. So design ops is the new thing, but it's good because it gives a spotlight to an area that you that is really important. And and that is essentially what I said earlier. It's everything that you do outside of the design. But that is
Mm-hmm.
more of a it's what a head of design or a design manager is supposed to do. It's what I like to call, you're being the shield for the team. So the head of the tip of the spear, the design manager or the most experienced designer in the team, depending on the setup, is to be the shield for the team. So they're there to take all the politics, all the fluff, all the stuff that gets thrown, and shield the rest of the design team from all the politics and red tape,
Yes.
so they can go and do their job.
Right.
and they use that shield to push the boundaries and move forward, and that covers everything from processes to um stakeholder management, where are you bringing the most value, how design fits into the biggest delivery of things, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think I like what you said. I think that it's definitely a buzzword and it's also really important. And I'm glad that it does have a name now because there definitely is an importance to this role of kind
Mhm.
of managing.
It's always
Um,
been there. It's always been there, and you kind of just end up the most senior person just ends up doing it with their job, right? But
right,
there, but
right.
there comes a fine line between doing design, managing a team, and then dealing with the business, and it's too
Right,
much. And
right.
it's no wonder designers, the higher they get, the more burnout and imposter
Yeah,
syndrome they have to deal with.
right. And it's like it's kind of the shift of the business side of things. It's like
Mm.
you're design, design, design. Not that design shouldn't think about the business. Obviously, it should. I mean, in many aspects, but there gets to a level if you do want to make this jump, and like you said, it always existed.
Mm.
They didn't know it. They didn't have a name for it, or that person just kind of took over that role. But it's a lot of additional thinking, and it's different parts of your brain, and it's
Yeah.
managing people, and it's communicating to stakeholders, and it's knowing the business side of the company, which
I,
is a
I
lot for someone to like.
I don't know how to raise a PO and get and put an invoice together. I design stuff, right?
Right,
So it's
exactly.
it's it's all that stuff, like,
Yeah,
regular one-to-one meetings and
right,
performance reviews and
right.
all that fun stuff.
All the fun stuff, yes. Yeah. I also liked what you said about there's kind of this glass ceiling. It's like, do you want to like continue to hone in on maybe one specific skill set, or do you want to kind of like move to this management lead type of
Mm.
position? What have you done? It sounds like you've done a little bit of everything, but maybe what do you enjoy the most? Is it kind of being that design ops, or is it being more of a honing your skills expert?
I love designing. I mean, for me, I'm a designer at heart. I like being
Yeah.
creative. I know that's where I can add most value. And but I've always been in a position where I've been with a team and been a great influencer within the team. So, um, helping others naturally just comes second nature.
Yeah.
So, so yeah, I think that's kind of where the natural glass ceiling gets hit.
Right.
And but I think it's a massive plus point to have because you can help support team members without being the manager. But
Right.
and just being a beacon of influence or knowledge where some of the other junior members or people who are a lot more can still be confident but need a second opinion can come to.
Yeah, I think that's a really powerful place to be. And I think what you're saying makes sense is like you're a designer, you love designing, you always want to be able to
Mm,
design. Like you don't want to necessarily have to deal with all the management stuff. You like the
mm,
design, but you also love mentoring and helping and being that second
yes.
opinion. And I think that's an amazing role to have where it's like you're senior and you want to help these designers and you want them to be able to come to you, but it's not like you have to fill out a performance review for them. It's like you're really there to
Yeah.
just support them.
Well, I do manage some of the t team members as well, so there is a little bit of the performance reviews there. I think
Okay.
that
Okay.
I think you have to take a little bit of that to the regardless, but that's where things like ADP list come in handy because it's all of that stuff without the paperwork.
Yes.
You're giving back to the design community just via experience and answering questions and stories.
Yes, totally. I agree. I love that aspect of it as well. Um yeah, no, that was super interesting. So what are you doing now, or what have you, I guess kind of where we left off is you were doing all these different things. You had all these roles, you've done a little bit of everything. So like where from there to maybe where you are today, what was that transition and what have you done?
So I always set myself goals, yearly goals, New Year goals. What this year I want to try and do this, and position myself in a little bit better. And um, one of my goals, one of my passions was to start mentoring and as well as, market feature on podcasts and kind of do a stand-up talk, all that kind of stuff. It's natural to kind of want to do that. And I think now more than ever, especially since there's so many different podcasts out there, a lot more people want to feature. But for me, my reasons is I want to give back to the design community. That's one of my passions that I feel good about. So I think it was during lockdown or when we were just coming out of lockdown. Um, I said, right, I want to sign up to one of these platforms where I can give back. And it just so happens ADP list was around. I signed up. I've only been there for, I'd say, around about 9, 10 months.
Okay.
So it's not relatively long, but I've already clocked up like, just shy of 1,000 minutes and,
Wow.
30, 40 sessions of people coming from all walks of life, all different levels, all around the world, asking questions.
Yeah.
And I think out of all the sessions I've had, about 4 or 5 of those people have gone on to then get the job that they wanted or get
Wow.
their goal that they want to just from like 1 or 2 sessions. And it was very apparent very quickly that, just by giving people advice, your own experience and knowledge, it can't be taken for granted because that's someone else's goal just trying to get into the industry. And it's just a simple conversation or a simple uh, couple of instructions to get of or do this, do that, it'll make you better, or
Yeah.
change this word on your portfolio and things
Mhm.
like that. And that helps massively because it's insider knowledge and yeah, it all helps, I think. So the I there's a fine line between, you know, a free 30-minute coaching session and a full-on consultation. So I'm quite firm in drawing the line there.
Yeah, no, totally. I think a lot of people, it's like it's probably like they know the answer, they know what they should be thinking about, but maybe they're like stuck in their head. And so it's just so good just to have someone. And like ADP list is a great resource just to reach out and say, hey,
Yeah,
like you're a designer, you've been in this, like this is something that I'm struggling with. Like, what do you think? And just getting that second opinion from someone, it's like unlocks something in their head. And I think
yeah,
that's
of
really
course.
great that you can see that progression. You can see them kind of be able to achieve that goal or go to the next step.
For sure. For
That's just
sure.
a little bit of help and giving back to like our younger selves. Like, oh, what
Yeah,
would it have been
100%.
like to have something like this in our
Yeah,
day?
100%. 100%. 100%.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I love that. Okay, so where are you today? What is your current, we mentioned it. You're
Yep.
currently working at Williams Commerce. What is that like? What are you doing there for them?
Yep. So currently working for Williams Commerce and Untitled, which is kind of a sub-brand of Williams Commerce, who specialize in websites mostly. So um, covering websites from, large scale e-commerce websites to the arts and culture sector.
Mm,
And yeah, just really enjoying it. Got a small design uh, team there. So um, between us, we cover everything, and every project is a different challenge, so it's not ever simple or straightforward.
right.
And we get to do things a bit more properly and a bit more thoroughly. So really get to hone our UX processes and refine some of the designs and how we deliver them. And at the same time, mentor some of the other junior design team members at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah, and I like that you're at, I think that's awesome that you're at a place where you can really dive deep and they appreciate the UX side of things. Because
Hmm.
I'm sure in your career, especially working with different startups, like you said, like sometimes that's not a tool that your customers want to have. And I think as designers, we're always like, it would be so good, so nice to be able to do more research. So that's great that
Yeah,
it sounds
yeah.
like you have that.
It's it's a mixed bag because a lot of people say UX, but they don't actually know what it means, or it means
Yeah,
different things in different sectors.
true.
So for this particular one, in this particular instance, um, the processes are essentially the same, but they may alter depending on the project. But it's more so we get to deep dive into someone's sector and know exactly w which way the wind is blowing, for example, what they want to achieve out of this project, because everyone wants a kick-ass website that makes them loads of money. But how do we do that? And most importantly, this website, it is for you, but it's for your users. So who are your users? What is your current one doing well? What are those not doing well? And
Yeah.
and what are some of the pitfalls that we need to navigate around, and so on and so forth. And you get to do that in a way which is rewarding.
That's great. Do you feel like your customers, your clients that you're building these sites for, they when you tell them the value of like understanding their users, do you think they get it? Or is there some
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah,
that's
for sure,
great.
for sure, for sure.
That's
So
amazing.
it's always, I mean, the whole UX discovery or UX is basically aligning business objectives with what the user needs within the budget of the project. So it's almost like an advanced version of that Venn diagram of
Yes.
quality, time, money, quality, right? So you can have two, pick one. So it's
Right.
almost, but for this, it's aligning all three. How can we get you guys what you want by giving the users what they need within the budget that we have?
Right. It's like an equation you have to like solve for X.
Yeah, 100, yeah, exactly.
What are you gonna do?
Yeah.
No, that's great. That's great. Yeah, well, thanks for kind of walking me through like overall your career. I think there were some really interesting tidbits that people would learn from this. I guess one of my last questions for you is like, which you already were like, this is so cliche, but like, where do you see yourself going? Like, where do you want to go in the next few years?
Oh,
Where's your
the,
design career gonna
the
take you?
the dreaded interview question. I don't know. I'm in a position where I'm enjoying myself.
Yeah.
Design is changing
Yes.
massively. The rate at which design is changing is it's really picked up, and is picked up more so since COVID as well. So,
Yeah.
there was a boom in like people wanting to get online, for example, and things like there's so much to play and at stake. So you have AR and VR that is now thrown into the mix. You have,
Right.
TikTok and so many other things going on where technology is just getting more and more advanced. So
Right.
as long as I'm still in the sector, as long as I'm still being creative, I don't mind where I go. I'm just enjoying the ride.
I think that's well said. It's like we have no idea what's going to happen. I think all of us
Yeah,
designers are like, wow, like so much is changing. It's really hard. And
yeah.
it's really interesting. Been doing this podcast for about I guess almost a year now, and
Mm.
more recently when I kind of am like, where do you see yourself going? People are like, I have no idea, just because it's
Yeah,
you've seen that shift of
yeah.
like technology, design, and everyone's
People,
like, I can't even guess
you
what's
can't,
gonna
you can't,
happen.
you can't guess where you want to go because things are just moving and changing direction
Yes.
so much.
Right.
Um, but when I think back to when I was wanting to become a designer, or the things that really influenced me as a designer, movies like um, Minority Report or Back to the Future, or even recently like Swan Song and all these other ones where they're movies based on the future. And as cool as they are, being a geeky designer, I look at things like the interfaces. How are they interacting, and
Yeah.
what's some of the technology they're using? Minority Report, the gloves and the glass, interfaces was just like mind blowing. And
Yeah.
you have, things like, iWatches and all sorts of stuff. So there's and Black Panther recently was a good one because the technology in that, it was just holograms coming up and things
Yeah.
like that. You just think that is where things are going to go, and I can see it happening. It's just a matter of time because you already kind of get like holographic keyboards and stuff, right? The way you can just
Right.
tap. infrared keyboards and whatnot. So it's only a matter of time. Someone's going to figure it out. And as soon as that happens, we'll be designing, you know, um, weird
Right.
stuff. Well, look, Google Glasses as well.
Yeah.
That's it's where that's where all the cool innovation happens. And I can't wait because we as designers are going to have to design with that in mind as well.
Totally. Yeah. I love that. It's like AI, what does design look like for AI? What does design look like for holograms? What does design
Yeah.
look like for
Now, well, there's so many industries right now that are utilizing AR. So, for example, furniture places where you want to buy a lamp or a sofa, you just pull up your camera and you can see what it looks like in your living room,
exactly.
right?
Yes.
So that is a good example of, wow, that's technology taking a leap step. You don't need to go to the shop
Right.
and try and picture it, or you don't need to print that off and try and put it in your living room and kind of imagine if it fits. No, it's there in
Yeah.
on your screen. So
Yeah.
it just goes to show the massive jump from where it was to where it is now. But the rate that where it's changed recently has just been wow. So just
Yeah.
sit back and enjoy the ride and let's see where it goes.
Yes, I love it. I love it. I think it's exciting. I think there's a lot of great challenges. I think it's also like, how can we build for making this accessible to everyone, right? Because, like
Mm.
you said, like everyone wants to be able to put the chair in their living room. That's not like a specific like person that knows technology. It's like your
Yeah.
grandma should be able to do it. So that's also a super
Yes.
interesting
Yeah.
challenge for
Yeah.
sure. But I'm excited to see what happens. Well, awesome. Thank you so much for chatting with me. It was really great to hear your story, where you came from, advice you have for designers kind of getting started or kind of trying to advance their career. So, yeah, thanks so much for joining me.
No, thanks for having me. Thanks for reaching out. I appreciate it.